Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Basil Considine, and we are going to be doing our second literature review-related webinar for the evening now. This is Search Methodology and ROL Matrices. This is one of many webinars that we have that delve into different assignments at ACU and that specifically look at details that steer students towards writing a doctoral dissertation or Doctor of Nursing practice project, and the second chapter that you'll find in those, where you do a lit review and need to make sense of all the reading that you've been doing, hopefully without having to reread everything all over again. Very briefly, if this is your first time with the Writing Center, we do work with students at many different points of contact. You can send us a paper for draft for feedback. You can request that we have a conversation over Zoom as this presentation is happening, or over phone. And you can also come to webinars such as this one. We have an archive of webinars available on our website, some of which I'll show you in a little bit. But our general point of contact, where most people who work with us regularly, they will go ahead and they'll schedule appointments on the WC Online system, submit a paper via Canvas, and then we'll send you feedback generally within 24 hours. If it's a holiday period, if you send us your draft and it's the night before Christmas, you might get it a little bit later than 24 hours. But during the school year, we try very hard to stick to less than 24 hours. I like to clear those sooner rather than later because we all do better if we can keep the feedback in mind before we do too much other writing. We have 3 more webinars coming up after this in the term. We are racing towards the end of the spring 1 term. So we have revising the dissertation prospectus coming up, writing the research methods section, and our dissertation 101, writing about impact, significance, and implications. Now, these are all helpful webinars to take, whether you are currently writing those sections, whether you're revising those sections, or just thinking ahead at how will these assignments that I'm working on now factor into what I do next. And that knowing what kinds of things to track, how you can shape your assignments to feed into your larger dissertation project, and indeed what notes you should be taking, what things you should be taking notes on so that you don't have to recreate the wheel. Those are all things that are both very helpful and empowering to know, because they allow you to say, okay, I know that this thing is coming down the line, and therefore I'm going to keep these notes in a place where I can find them, because I know I'm going to be writing a longer version of this come fall term or summer term. You'll see me showing various things today that you can download from this website here. I'm going to go ahead and copy that link into the chat window. Give me just a moment to do that. And you can download the files that you'll see me using here. All right, this is also what we call a hands-on webinar, in that we will not be dealing with a slide deck for most of the presentation. We're going to be looking at specific websites and specific files. So I'm going to change my sharing now here so that you can see my desktop. And I'm going to go ahead and look at a particular assignment. Now, the examples that I've brought up here, I have chosen for convenience, because they're assignments that are either coming up soon in some classes or have recently passed, and so I can refer to them to, in a familiar fashion to people who are watching this. If you're attending right now and you have a specific assignment that you'd like to ask about or like to have used an example, that's fine. We very much encourage that. Just go ahead and type your question or your suggestion in the chat box, and I'll be happy to follow on that. All right, so here we're looking at one nursing course, Nursing 612. And this has several assignments that lead towards writing a literature review. There is, first of all, starting, okay, what kind of question are you trying to be answering? And from that, you narrow that down. You do a preliminary look where you build a synthesis table of, okay, here's where things are looking. You create your theoretical framework that will inform how you are looking at things and what you choose to focus on. And eventually, in this case, in about 10 days, you come to this first draft of the literature review. So let's take a look at what this is asking to be done. There should be an introduction where you talk about, okay, here's the problem. Here's why we know it's worthy of investigation. Any background information like how prevalent this issue is or how costly or something. How that specifically connects to nurses. The PICO question. And the search methods. Followed by the literature review itself. So, although this particular version here is only going to be 5 to 7 pages, as this grows eventually into a document of perhaps 10, 20, 30 or more pages as over subsequent assignments, the basic format here is a good one. Start out with, okay, introduce us briefly to the issue. Tell us how it's significant to nurses. What exactly are you trying to answer and how? And then how did you go searching for information to inform your doing this, to inform your decisions before you start going and collecting data from patients or whatever your eventual study happens to be. And then once all that's out of the way, we have the body of the lit review and a few other things, including this matrix here. Let's go ahead and look at the final form of this particular assignment, because this week 5 assignment 1 is the literature review rough draft. And you'll write various things that go to expanding that and that get integrated eventually as the final literature review paper. So you'll see that this does not give you a new outline, but it does go into some detail about how this should be introduced. You will then create an introduction to your partial literature review, which will explain to the reader why your question is an important issue. A search history is written to someone who would like to explore your work and would be able to follow the same trail through the maze of literature as you. During weeks 3 and 4, you will explore frameworks and models of care. Okay, so that's going off in another direction. And we are interested in how this expands on what we saw in that earlier section. And we got one more instruction here. A synthesis table or evidence matrix will be used to organize your work, as well as to find new ways of examining existing literature. By the way, do let me know if this text is a little small for you to read. I am on a gigantic 4K monitor, so this is very easy for me to read. I think I've zoomed it in enough for anyone watching this on video, but if it's a little bit small for you on whatever screen you're looking at, just let me know and I'm happy to resize accordingly. All right, so let us go ahead and let's look at some examples of what that might look like, that matrix part. Now, this is what I use for my own dissertation students. As you can see, there's a lot of breakdown here. And the idea isn't to make you fill this in all at once for everything, but to say it is very helpful to be able to break out this information and be able to search quickly and see, okay, what theorists are being used, or what course did I read this for? You're looking for your other notes on the topic. What methodologies were used? What population was examined and what sample of the population was used? What was the specific problem that they were addressing? And what was the purpose research question or PICO question, as the case might be? Now, this is really designed for someone who's at the dissertation stage or getting pretty close. Most of the time, you'll be working with something that is a little bit, well, a little bit easier to use. I'll just say that out front. There's a point where you really have to break things down, but you start breaking this down more for stuff that you have some fair idea that you're going to be using. So let's look at what the program gives you. And this evidence-based table is available through a number of the DMP course websites. You'll see it's the same basic idea of we're going to break this information into columns in a table with some abstraction, like we just have the citation here. Purpose in question, design, sample size, variables, etc. Now, while not all of these necessarily will be used in that appendix table that's mentioned in the guidelines, let me pop back to that. That is this here. This is a very handy tool that will help you decide what is important to include. So for example, if you found that every single study used the same statistical test, then you don't need to spend a column on that. You can have a note saying all studies used this test. But you're certainly going to want to have a discussion of the results for each one. Now, there are a number of things that you might want to do as you go about building this out. And one of those might be to say, well, I really like being able to sort. So you could just recreate the same table in Excel, which is what I've done here. And I'm going to use Excel for this next demonstration because it is something that I find is very handy for being able to sort information and see what kind of patterns you come up with and what kind of patterns you can spot. And for this end, I am going to bring up a couple examples here. So give me just a moment to come to the ACU library. And let's go ahead. And if you're in the room right now and don't mind sharing a topic, you can either just type it in the chat room or send it to me as a private message. If there's a topic that you are very interested in that we can use for this example, just let me know and I'm happy to use it. Otherwise, I will come up with some examples here. So please feel free to send me a message if you'd like me to be searching on something that is of interest to you. All right, so our starting topic here, we're going to look at hand washing nursing. You see that's 40,000 results. I mentioned date restrictions. Somehow we have something that's marked in 1227. I'm pretty sure that's an error and that's not something published in the Middle Ages. But wanting this to be recent research, let's go ahead and we're going to make this, let's look at literature published since 2001. Now that's 20 years, that's still 17,000. So let's go for 2016, so a 5-year period. And that's down to 4,000. So you want to do a lot more narrowing down than that. I see someone else has typed in a suggestion here. So the suggestion here is sexual harassment prevention, which I'm going to put in quotes because that is a standard term in the literature. And so if I put it in quotes, that'll help me narrow down what I'm getting. The person who gave that suggestion didn't tell me what exact environment they were thinking of. So if you could follow up with that detail, whether you're talking about in a school environment, in a workplace environment, that would be very helpful. And I will add that once we see the search going here. All right, so sexual harassment prevention and gets us about 3,000 results. So that's still a lot. This is, by the way, inherited my earlier 2016 to 2020 restriction there. So let's narrow this down a little bit. Let's add in workplace. That about halves the number. We could add in some other things here because we're trying to narrow this down. So let's look at this here and say, let's turn on this scholarly peer-reviewed journals thing. There are some textbooks and such that might be excluded, but let's put that on and see what changes here. That knocks us down to 223. That is starting to look much more manageable. So far, our restrictions are being scholarly peer-reviewed journals published in the last 5 years. We use the search string sexual harassment prevention and workplace. And that is probably about time for us to put in the last detail provided so far. And let's try putting in federal. 91. Now, federal could bring up federal law or something like that. So let's try making that federal government and see what comes in here. Now that drops us down to 8. Now 8 is probably a bit small for what we are doing now. So if federal government is in fact the place where you want to focus, then I'd say, well, depending on the constraints of this assignment, you might want to talk with the librarian to see if they suggest any search synonyms, workplace, a place of business, perhaps, or broaden the date range here. We're going to go ahead and try federal employee and see what that brings us here. Now that turns out to be too narrow. That brings us 0. So I'm going to back up here. And let's talk about a couple other things that are easier in some things to do than others. So I'm going to take this exact same search string, and I'm going to go in this tab, I'm going to open up Google Scholar, scholar.google.com. And I'm going to paste the same search string, and I'm going to go ahead and use the same date restriction. That gets me 53 results. Now we don't have the same peer review journal thing, so that explains some of the difference in results here. But this is the kind of thing that you might describe in your literature search process. I searched at this database, I searched that database, I got these results. I was not able to restrict by peer review because that option was not available in Google Scholar. All right, I'm going to do one more, and then we'll talk about the writing part. All right, so oh, by the way, when you're taking your notes here, not only do you want to copy and paste these search strings, go ahead and copy and paste these links here. I'm going to go ahead and in my master table here, I would just go ahead and paste the link there for now, or into the keyword search, and then populate them as I went. So for example, if I wanted to retain this here, I could just go ahead and paste that in there. And then the URL, for now, I'll just use the results that I got for that. Or you could, if you're reading a specific article, you paste that in. But you get the idea of how to search for those. All right, I'm going to open up a new tab here. Let's start with this old search string because it saves me re-entering the dates there. Actually, no, I'm going to go ahead and clear all this. All right, let's start a new search. Our search is going to be, this is a write-in suggestion, type 2 diabetes, Native American, and we're going to start with self-efficacy. Now, you can, of course, just paste in your complete question, but that's probably going to have something's not right there. I'm going to do a new search. Yeah, if you paste in something that's too specific, that may prevent you from getting the results that you want. It's better to start more general and then become more specific in your searches. So here, 1817, again, that's a bit early for what I have in mind. Let's go ahead and I'm going to roll that up to 2006 and see what we have. Starting at 3,600 results. This drops us by half to 1,822. Okay, let's go ahead and bump that to 2016. And that drops us down to 475. Still a lot. There are probably questions of whether this is actually focused on Native Americans or if it just happens to list that in a demographic breakdown table, say. But we've got a few other things that we're going to use to narrow that down. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the scholarly peer-reviewed journals only limitation. And that takes us to 296. All right, so this is starting to narrow things down. And there's some stuff that we want to pay attention to. And that, again, if you meet with one of our fabulous research librarians who will take emails, instant messages, and phone calls to help you say, okay, well, Native American, that term is sometimes used synonymously with American Indian. I happen to be dialing in from Minneapolis, Minnesota, where you go to the American Indian and Center, and some tribal groups have chosen to identify that way. So if you're doing that, if you see something like that coming up, perhaps you want to use a equivalence thing, like, and either Native American or American Indian. And see, does that broaden our search? A bit too much. Now watch what happens when I make that change. And because this is treating it as a new search, it has removed my date restriction and the scholarly journals only part. So I'm going to go ahead and stick those back on. All right, 306. So this is a more manageable place for starting. Now, probably there's going to be some sort of geographic restriction that might get added. You might add something about the population, say, adding in young adult. But we're starting to get to the point where you might be looking at, oh, that brings us down to 35. If this was something that you suggested, I'm just going to go ahead and paste that search string into the chat window so you could bring it up in your own web browser if you want. And in fact, let me go ahead and I'm going to do that for the other result that we were looking at too. So we're starting to get to the point where 35, well, this is the point where we can actually start looking at some stuff. And do you want to read the whole text? No. You want to read the title. And if the title looks like it might be something relevant, then you want to read the abstract. So here, let's first one, transcultural diabetes care in the United States. Well, that's a position statement. So even though it's in a peer-reviewed journal and might do citations, it's probably, if we're looking for like research studies, it's probably not the right one. It might have some interesting citations though. So let's look through here and see, what do we find? Bunch of stuff about food, and which does tie into diabetes. But I'm going to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and I'm going to step back one step. And let's look at this one here. It is possible to get too specific. In this case, for reasons of time, I'd like to start with this piece here, where you see it tells us, oh, I can grab a PDF. I can look at it in a web page. Let's look at the web page here. So our goal right now is to see, is this something that is worth reading about more? And we see it's a write-up about a pilot study targeting risk factors for type 2 diabetes in American Indian youth. And we even have the places they used, the populations they used. And okay, so let's say that I was using the nursing programs, the DMP programs table here. Well, let's start out with, let's get the basic details here. I want to have in my reference section the citation information. Cool. If you're using Zotero, you can go ahead and download a file there, or copy and paste this handy dandy APA stuff. It's not perfect, but it saves us a lot of time. So I'm going to also down here create my references section. And I've copied and pasted that. I'm gonna I can clean that up later, but I'll just add a hanging indent. And I see that capitalization isn't quite right, so I'll fix that. And I can get rid of the highlighting later. So we've got a whole bunch of authors here, far more than the 6 that we need to abbreviate to first author and first et al. So let's go ahead and Sauter et al. Period 2018. All right. Now, just the brief looking at it, I was like, yeah, this looks like the kind of thing I want to be working with. So I'm going to bring up the full text there. And looking at this abstract, it looks like what I want to be paying attention to. So let's go ahead and see what the table asks. Purpose in question. Well, do they have a section called purpose? They do not. I'm doing a find search using the Control F or Command F, if you're on a Mac, shortcut, and I searched for purpose, for question. They don't have it written out quite so explicitly. So that just means I need to do a little bit of reading here. So let's see. Here's the purpose. They were evaluating the effect of TTP, this TTP program on obesity measures. So I can probably, for now, I'll just put this in mostly as a copy and paste. Going to go ahead. Evaluate. And I can have the exact question and later if I find it. But I don't think they included it as a question because they're doing an evaluation and it's kind of implicit. The question is this effective or not? Now, in terms of the design here, let's see. They say, oh, it's a randomized pilot and feasibility study. All right, paste that in. Sample size. So let's see, scrolling down. Aha, participants. They do not give us numbers here exactly. That will probably come later in here. So that we see here, down in results, 62 participants from 52 families. And because I'm just taking scratch notes for myself now, I'm going to go ahead and paste that whole thing in there. I'll probably go in and simplify that and make it more consistently formatted later. But for now, I'm just trying to grab that. And we'll see that they were actually tracking quite a bit of information here. And I probably won't be listing all of this because a lot of it is just demographic stuff. But at some point, I'd go in and sort out which ones here, which tests they do. You see they list some of these things that they're tracking here, like doing a box Cox transformation. That would go in here, results, strength, weaknesses. So that's the basic idea out there. I'm going to go ahead and look at, I got a couple messages in the chat room. Okay, looks like I covered those. All right, so let's look at the, what we would get if we went and looked at another one here. So let's see. We're going to back up and let's going to go with this one here, which also looks like it's dealing with youth. So again, we can go to Cite here, and that will show us this nice, mostly APA style thing here. If you're wondering, this is someone writing in that, hey, there's no page range there, probably because it's a electronically published thing, and so they're not individually paginated. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to our references here and see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, it's the threshold where I'd want to abbreviate immediately. And let's go ahead and go through our list here. What can we find here in the full text? Actually, so we look at the abstract first, and there's some stuff that we can find just from the abstract. Oh, children from the Southwest United States. And the stated purpose, increase understanding. All right, let's go ahead and look at the full text for this one. Close that window. And so we can grab this as a PDF. And we're going looking for very particular things, very specific details. Okay, tell me what their design was. Okay. And let's look at further analysis. So that you see that they used SEM, structural equation modeling, to examine the predictors. And we got this table with the results there. For now, we're just going to paste that in there. You can always add more detail there. And this is talking more about the results. Breakdown of specific things. Now, in terms of results, this is probably a good place to start. Now, you've probably noticed that as I've been going along, I've been resizing things here. Don't worry about doing that all the time. You can always do a select all and quickly change everything to the size and font that you want. So you don't have to do that as you go along. It's just something that is very fast for me to do, so I do it as a matter of habit. Now, looking at this, as you might see, well, okay, there's this, it's kind of a big column, and that's one of the disadvantages of using the table. If you're using an Excel spreadsheet, one of the things you can do is turn on this wrap text function. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste some stuff in here. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to spontaneously add a column here. And if I were to paste that in here, all right, wrap that text. And then if I decide I want to read that more as a paragraph, I just have to resize it. Oh, there we go. So you can do this kind of dynamic resizing in Excel much more easily than you can do it in Microsoft Word. So that's one of the reasons why I personally recommend using a spreadsheet. This is probably a good point to show you that share that I talked about earlier. So this is the supplemental area that I mentioned earlier. It is a Google Drive share where I keep various things related to our presentation. So this is the literature review matrix template here. And you can, if you want a Microsoft, if you want a version of the DMP program one, I've already converted that into Excel. If you want that, just let me know and I'm happy to share it with you. All right, moving back to our core presentation here. All right, so let's go ahead and put in one more here. And we're going to go back to the results list. And we'll see if we have another one that we want to look at. Okay, Adolescent. Let's go ahead and look at this one. And in this case, we'll look at the abstract and see, but wait, it's talking about alcohol use. And while alcohol use is often comorbid with diabetes too, just looking at the abstract and thinking, well, this doesn't seem to be quite what we're looking for. But let me do a search, and oh, it's coming up in the reference list. So this is what we call a false positive, something that looks initially like it might be a relevant result, but turns out not to be. But this does look like the kind of thing that might be interested in. So we could go ahead and, oh, that web page is being archived. However, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this information here. And I'm going to do this in Google Scholar because Google Scholar is really handy for this purpose. Paste in the citation. And it not only shows us the NIH website, but also shows us who has cited this. So I can click on that and find, oh, here are 14 different things published that have cited this in their reference list, and see if any of these happen to align with what I'm looking for. Now, let's go back to the reference list that I was building at the bottom of this document. And I'm going to go ahead, and even though this is relatively recent research, I'm going to go ahead and plug this into Google Scholar. And that didn't come up. Now, but reason it hasn't come up, I think, is because it only lets you search for so much text, and so it cut that off at the author list. And if the authors aren't abbreviated just the way that they are in the Google database, that might not necessarily come through. So let me try searching instead for the title and the title of the journal. And so this comes up. And again, it was just published in 2018, but it's been cited by 7 articles. And go ahead and look at that and see, oh, well, hey, here's another piece that is just published last year. And if I go to that cited by 1, oh, there's been something after that that's actually, that might be a mistake because that says 2013. That's probably a mistake there. But certainly this one here has, this looks promising, as does this one down here. So let's go ahead and look at this document here. I don't have access to it in Google, but if we go to ACU, let's see if we can get it through the ACU library. So I go ahead and I do a search for that. And let's go ahead and check Journal Finder. Aha. So yes, we can get that. So just because you don't see a full text button immediately doesn't mean you can't get it through ACU, because here we have the whole document. Now, there was a comment from someone in the chat window about how you're defining the age group. And that is an important thing where you really want to be talking with the search librarian, because if you're using a term like young adults, you may be using it in a different way than other people are. And the search librarians are the people who are experts in the searching, who can help you figure out the common ways to define that. Now, if you're using specifically young adults, let's just punch this through here. Let's make that type 2. Now that's still pretty broad. You probably don't want to do something like aged 20 to 25, because that will probably get you on terms of phrasing and be overly restrictive, but let's just see what that gets us for today. That is not really getting us what we want. As I suspected, it's too specific. So in terms of how you would describe age 20 to 25, that can be read in so many different ways. Again, talk with a search librarian. Young adults is a particularly problematic and annoyingly problematic term, because young adult literature refers to different than young adult as far as the census is concerned, and then in terms of other applications, it varies a great deal. So I would expect there'd probably be a bit of screening through different results just to get around that. The point of this webinar, however, is focusing on how to write things up. So let us look at the literature search methods thing. And I'm just going to use this Word document because it's convenient. So the literature search methods, is usually going to be a paragraph or so. And it's really not something you should overthink. The important thing is to have the details so that when you look at your notes, you can see, oh, I searched for this. Used. And then see how well we kept track of this. So I can back up through these searches here and see what they produced, and go all the way back to this one here. So all right, so I've selected and copy and pasted my search string here. The initial keyword search was conducted in ACU OneSearch using the keyword string and see, okay, that gave me 3,662. I'm going to zoom this in a little bit to make it easier to view on the video. Okay, and then I'm going to go back through my search. I'm now moving forward and see, okay, so what I changed there was I added the date restriction. And then you can march through the other things. And very helpful. Use the search history button. You should be writing or copy and pasting these as you go, but you can always go to the search history and see, oh, not only is here the exact search, but I can also just click on this. So if I can't remember the results or what I did, I can use these buttons to do it. So, all right, then I tried adding that and then click on rerun and then count the results and report that. Or I could summarize this and saying, okay, I tried using American Indian as a search synonym, et cetera, et cetera. So basically this ends up being a short paragraph that says something rather like, this paragraph here. Let me zoom in a little bit for benefit of people watching on video. It says, okay, here's what I was trying to answer, which is just your PICO question. Here's where I went to search. Here are the terms that I used. And if they're being used in a particular way, like using Native American as a synonym for American Indian, put that in there. And then in this case, they started out with this date restriction, so they wrote that up there. In my write-up, we added this because there were too many results. And then any other things that happened, and if there are other works that are included in a lit review, what they chose to add. So they say, okay, we were looking at both quantitative and qualitative studies, which they said they chose because it was following these guidelines for an integrative review. Great. They removed duplicates and they removed anything that didn't directly connect to the PICO question. Now, this particular write-up doesn't give the individual numbers for each step. Now, the reason it doesn't is that it would be redundant because they have this handy-dandy diagram showing the numbers at each stage. Now, either of these is correct. This happens to be a particularly elegant way of showing this information. The point is that you should have the information someplace. We are getting close to the end of our time here, so I'm just going to put out a call for questions. If there's something that someone would like to ask or would like me to go into more detail on, or even demonstrate one of the search functions that I've been talking about already. The search methods, literature search methods paragraph is very easy to write, provided that you've been either taking notes or you use the handy-dandy search history function that we were looking at. Where is that? Here we are. This handy-dandy search history function, which again is just here under the search bar, and it allows you to not only go through, but these are numbered, so you can keep track of them and see, oh yes, on such and such a day, I look for these things. Now, I would recommend, because it's very handy to have, that you go ahead and you sign in so that this will be saved under your account. Now, let's see what happens when I sign in after doing some searches. Aha! So even though I wasn't saved in then, because it's tracking me, it has now saved these to my account. Now, these are only the searches that I did today. So again, make sure that you sign in so that you have these to reference later. Because if you are not taking notes as you go along, there's still, we can get to all the information we needed to fill out that search method section, because all of the searches are here. And I can see, oh, I added this thing. I removed something. I made this. Here I added the limitation to scholarly peer-reviewed journals, which would then be a step that I write up here. Now, you might want to start with that restriction, but the point is, whatever steps you take, you can find in that search history and write them down, and then your reader can see, oh, okay, that's how they found that. And sometimes, that's why the results are different than mine. I used this database that they didn't use. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for coming. I hope this was a helpful webinar. And if you missed our earlier one, don't worry, the recordings, I will be posting them this evening to our Writing Center website. All right, thank you very much for coming. I'll stick around for another minute or two in case you have any last questions. Have a good night.